Daniel, honey, can you grab the wine from the kitchen? Grace's voice carried over the chatter of our guests. She was smiling, radiant as always, her laugh bubbling up as she clinked glasses with our friends. I glanced at her from across the room, the warm light catching the glint of her wedding ring, a symbol of the life we had built over 8 years. Sure, give me a minute, I said, weaving through the crowd. The house felt alive, filled with familiar faces. Our kids were upstairs, laughing with their cousins, while everyone downstairs toasted to our love. I couldn't help but feel proud. This was the life I had worked hard for, the life I thought we both cherished. As I poured the wine in the kitchen, the faint sound of voices caught my attention. They were coming from the hallway just outside the kitchen. My mother's tone was unmistakable, sharp, urgent. Are you crazy? Daniel's here. He could catch you too. I froze, bottle in hand, unsure if I had heard her correctly. I inched closer to the doorway, my heartbeat quickening. Then came Grace's laugh. It was different from the one she had used with our guests, cold, dismissive mocking. Catch us? What's he gonna do? Cry about it? He's too pathetic to stand up to anyone. Besides, he's just a walking wallet. I don't care what that loser thinks. My stomach turned, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. I gripped the edge of the counter, the wine bottle slipping from my grasp and clinking loudly against the granite. Lower your voice, my mother hissed. This is reckless. I didn't hear Grace's response because I was already moving, my footsteps slow but deliberate as I approached the hallway. My breathing was shallow, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I turned the corner, I saw them. Grace was perched on Eric's lap. His arm was wrapped around her waist, her hand playing with his hair as they leaned into each other, their conversation interrupted by my sudden presence. For a moment, none of us spoke. The air was heavy, thick with tension. My mother's face went pale, her hand flying to her mouth. Daniel, oh no, it's not what it looks like, she stammered, stepping forward as if to block my view. They're just joking around. It's all innocent fun. Eric scrambled to push Grace off his lap, but she didn't move. Instead, she leaned back and smirked at me, her expression unapologetic. Oh, grow up, loser, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Yeah, we're together. And what are you going to do about it, huh? She crossed her arms, her tone growing colder. If you even think about divorcing me, you'll never see your kids again. Don't forget that. I felt like the ground had opened beneath me. My mind raced with a mix of anger, disbelief, and sadness. How long had this been going on? How could my mother, the woman who had always been my rock, stand by and let this happen? But I didn't let my emotions show. Not yet. Instead, I forced myself to stay silent, my face unreadable. Eric cleared his throat, his voice shaky. Damn, man, it's not like that. We didn't mean for you to. Shut up, I said, my voice low but firm. He flinched, his eyes darting to Grace, who still looked unfazed. I don't owe you an explanation, Grace said, her smirk widening. I mean, you should have seen this coming, Daniel. You're boring. You're weak. You're just there. What do you expect? My mother took a step closer to me, her voice trembling. Daniel, please don't make a scene. Let's just go back to the party and... I turned to her, my jaw tight. A scene? Is that what you're worried about? A scene? My voice was rising, and I didn't care anymore. You knew about this, didn't you? How long, Mom? How long have you been covering for them? Daniel, it's not like that. Don't lie to me. I snapped, my voice echoing down the hallway. For the first time, my mother looked genuinely afraid, her hands shaking as she tried to form a response. Eric stood up, raising his hands as if to defuse the situation. Dan, listen, I didn't mean for this to happen, okay? We didn't mean to hurt you. It just what? I interrupted, stepping closer to him. Happened? Like it was some kind of accident. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You're my best friend, Eric. You were supposed to have my back, not stab me in it. He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Grace rolled her eyes, clearly growing impatient. Oh, please. Stop playing the victim, Daniel. You're acting like I'm the bad guy here, but maybe if you weren't so useless, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. Her words stung, but I didn't let her see it. Instead, I stared at her, my expression calm but cold. You've said enough. I finally said, my voice steady. Both of you? I turned and walked back toward the kitchen, my movements slow and deliberate. I could hear Grace calling after me, her tone mocking. Oh, what are you going to do now? Cry about it? Run away like you always do? I ignored her, focusing on the next steps. My mind was already working, already planning. In the kitchen, I grabbed the wedding certificate from the drawer where we kept important documents. I looked at it for a long moment, the paper representing everything I had believed in, everything I thought we had built together. Then, without hesitation, I tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper was satisfying, almost cathartic. I tossed the pieces onto the counter and slipped off my wedding ring. When I returned to the hallway, they were still standing there, frozen in place. I threw the ring at Grace's feet. Congratulations, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You two deserve each other. And with that, I left the house, the sound of Grace's protests fading behind me. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of clarity. My world had crumbled, but I wasn't going to let them destroy me. It felt heavier than paper should, like the weight of everything it once stood for was pressing down on my chest. My fingers traced the embossed gold lettering, the date of our marriage, the ink from our signatures. 12 years. 12 years of shared laughter, struggles, and dreams. 12 years that now felt like a lie. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, trying to untangle the knot of anger, disbelief, and sadness inside me. How had I missed the signs? How had I let it get this far? The memory of Grace's mocking laughter at the party came flooding back, her cruel words echoing in my head. Catch us? What's he going to do? Cry about it? He's too pathetic to stand up to anyone. I slammed my fist onto the desk, the sudden pain grounding me. I couldn't afford to spiral into self-pity. Not now. Not when everything I had worked for, my marriage, my family, was falling apart. I reached for my phone, scrolling through old photos. There we were on our honeymoon, arms wrapped around each other on a sunlit beach. The kid's first birthday party, Grace's smile brighter than the candles on the cake. Eric standing beside me at my college graduation, grinning like the brother I had always considered him to be. But now, every image felt tainted. I tossed the phone onto the desk and stood up, pacing the room. Memories rushed in, uninvited and relentless. Grace had always been fiery, confident, and unapologetic. It was one of the things that had drawn me to her in the first place. She had a spark, a magnetic energy that made everyone in the room gravitate toward her. But there had been red flags too, hadn't there? Her sharp tongue during arguments, the way she would belittle me in front of others under the guise of just joking, the way she dismissed my concerns about her long hours at work or Eric's increasingly frequent visits to our house. You're paranoid, she had said once, rolling her eyes. Eric's your best friend. Stop acting so insecure. And I had believed her. Eric. I clenched my fists, anger bubbling up again. He had been my brother in everything but blood. We'd met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and shared dreams of success. He was there when I landed my first job, the first to congratulate me when I proposed to Grace. And now, he was the man she had chosen to betray me with. I sat back down, my head in my hands. The signs had been there all along. Eric's constant presence in our lives, always offering to babysit the kids when Grace had work meetings, always knowing just a little too much about our personal lives. And my mother. I shook my head, bitterness rising in my throat. My own mother, who had always been my strongest supporter, had known. She had stood by and watched as my wife and best friend destroyed my marriage. This is reckless, I remembered her saying at the party, her voice laced with urgency. Daniel's here. He could catch you too. She wasn't shocked or horrified by their actions. She was just worried about them getting caught. I stood again, unable to stay still. The walls of the study felt suffocating, the air thick with the weight of betrayal. I opened the door, stepping into the hallway. The house was quiet now, the kids asleep upstairs, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath their roof. I walked into the living room, where the remnants of the party were still scattered. Half-empty glasses, crumpled napkins, and the faint smell of champagne lingered in the air. I picked up one of the glasses and stared at it. The faint lipstick mark on the rim reminding me of Grace's bright red lips as she laughed at me earlier. A sudden wave of rage took over. I hurled the glass against the wall, the shattering sound echoing through the empty room. For a moment, the release felt good, but the silence that followed was deafening. I sat down on the couch, my head resting in my hands. I thought about the kids. They didn't deserve this. Whatever happened next, I had to protect them. Grace had threatened to take them from me if I tried to leave her, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table and started searching for divorce lawyers. It was late, but I didn't care. I needed to act now, while the anger was still fresh, while my resolve was unshakable. As I scrolled through the list of firms, my phone buzzed on the table. It was my mother. I stared at the screen, her name glaring at me like an accusation. I let it ring. When it stopped, I opened her text. "Daniel, please call me. We need to talk." I deleted the message without replying. What could she possibly say that would make this better? She had chosen to side with Grace and Eric. She had watched me walk into that party, smiling and clueless, while they laughed behind my back. The phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Grace. "We need to talk. Come to bed." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Talk? About what? How she had humiliated me in front of my own mother. How she had turned our home into a stage for her betrayal. I put the phone down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The anger was still there, but now it was joined by something else, a cold, calculated determination. This wasn't going to break me. If Grace thought she could walk all over me and keep the kids as leverage, she was in for a rude awakening. If Eric thought he could betray me and come out unscathed, he was about to learn the true meaning of consequences. And if my mother thought she could justify her actions with excuses, she was about to find out how wrong she was. I stood up, grabbing the wedding certificate from the desk in my study. I stared at it one last time before tearing it in half, the pieces fluttering to the floor. The time for being blind and complacent was over. The storm was coming, and I was going to make damn sure I was ready. The morning light poured through the living room windows as I sat on the couch, sipping coffee. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My thoughts were sharp, focused. Today was the beginning of the end, for Grace, Eric, and everyone who had betrayed me. I heard Grace's footsteps approaching before I saw her. She sauntered in, her expression a mix of irritation and smugness, as if she expected me to apologize for walking out of the party last night. "There you are," she said, crossing her arms. "Are you ready to stop sulking and act like an adult?" I didn't respond right away, taking another slow sip of coffee. Her tone was condescending, like I was a child who had thrown a tantrum. "We have kids, Daniel," she continued, her voice sharp. "You can't just run off whenever things don't go your way. Grow up." I set the mug down on the coffee table with deliberate care and looked up at her, a calm smile playing on my lips. The smile caught her off guard, and for a split second, I saw uncertainty flicker in her eyes. "Don't worry, Grace," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not sulking. I'm just getting started." Her smirk faltered. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up, adjusting my tie as if I were about to head to work. "It means you should enjoy this while it lasts." Without giving her a chance to respond, I walked past her and out the door. I could feel her gaze burning into my back, but I didn't care. She would find out soon enough. That day marked the beginning of my meticulous planning. For the next few weeks, I threw myself into action. Every spare moment was dedicated to building my case. I met with lawyers, explaining the situation in detail and handing over every piece of evidence I could gather. Adultery is tricky, my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, told me during our first meeting. But given the circumstances and the fact that you've caught them in the act, you have a strong case. We'll make sure she doesn't use the kids as leverage. Her confidence was reassuring, but I wasn't just relying on the courts. I needed to hit Grace and Eric where it hurt. Using a spare phone, I began collecting evidence discreetly. I searched through bank statements, text messages, and Grace's social media. Late at night, I sifted through emails and receipts. Patterns emerged, dinners I hadn't been a part of, hotel bookings that didn't match our family trips, expenses that suddenly made sense in hindsight. The pieces were falling into place. One evening, as I was going through my files in the study, my mother called. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment before finally answering. "Daniel," she began, her voice hesitant. "We need to talk." "Do we?" I replied coolly. "Yes, we do," she insisted. "I know you're angry, but I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to keep the family together." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. By covering for Grace and Eric? By letting them humiliate me in front of everyone? "It's not that simple," she said, her tone defensive. "I thought I was helping. I thought if you didn't find out, things could..." "Could what?" I interrupted. "Stay the same? You wanted me to keep living a lie, pretending everything was fine while my wife and my best friend made a mockery of our marriage." Her silence was telling. "You chose her lies over your own son," I said, my voice cold. "Live with that." Before she could respond, I hung up. I had no room for excuses. Not from her, not from anyone. The next morning, Grace tried to act like nothing had changed. She greeted me in the kitchen with her usual feigned cheerfulness, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "So," she said casually, "are we going to talk about your little outburst at the party? Or are you just going to keep pouting?" I didn't even look up from my newspaper. "What's there to talk about?" She sighed, clearly annoyed. "Daniel, I've explained this already. Nothing happened with Eric. You overreacted. And honestly, it's exhausting dealing with your insecurities." I folded the newspaper and set it down, meeting her gaze with a calm intensity. "You're right, Grace. It is exhausting. But don't worry, I'm taking steps to fix that." Her brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood, straightening my shirt. "It means you'll see soon enough." Her frustration was evident, but I didn't stick around to hear her response. Over the following days, I made sure to keep my distance while observing Grace's behavior. She was growing restless, sensing a change in me, but unsure of what it meant. One night, as I worked late in the study, she knocked on the door and walked in without waiting for a response. "Are you avoiding me?" she asked, her arms crossed. "Not at all," I replied, not bothering to look up from my laptop. "Then why are you acting so weird?" I finally glanced at her, my expression unreadable. "Weird? No, Grace. I'm just busy." Her eyes narrowed. "Busy with what?" "Things you wouldn't understand." She scoffed. "Oh, give me a break. You're not fooling anyone, Daniel. Whatever you're planning, it won't work. You don't have the guts." I smiled faintly, closing my laptop. "Good night, Grace." Her frustration boiled over, but she stormed out without another word. Meanwhile, I continued building my case, quietly gathering support from those who had been at the party. A few discreet conversations revealed that others had noticed Grace and Eric's behavior long before I had. Honestly, I didn't want to say anything, one of Grace's friends admitted over coffee. But the way she and Eric were acting, it was obvious. "I'm sorry, Daniel. Their apologies didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the truth, and ensuring that Grace and Eric couldn't manipulate the narrative to their advantage." By the end of the third week, everything was in place. I had the evidence, the legal strategy, and the resolve to see it through. One evening, as Grace sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I placed a thick envelope on the coffee table in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, looking up. "Open it," I said, leaning back against the wall. She hesitated, her confidence faltering for the first time. Slowly, she opened the envelope and pulled out the documents inside. Her face turned pale as she read through them. "Divorce papers?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes," I said simply. "And before you threaten me about the kids again, you should know that I've already spoken to my lawyer. I have more than enough evidence to prove what you've done." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. "Daniel, wait. We can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I interrupted. "You made your choice, Grace. Now I'm making mine." She stammered, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "Save it," I said coldly. "This is just the beginning." And with that, I walked away, leaving her to stare at the papers in stunned silence. The storm was here, and I was ready to see it through. The air in the living room was tense, thick with unspoken words and mounting dread. I had invited Grace, Eric, my mother, and all our family members and friends to the house under the pretense of discussing the future. None of them had any idea what I had planned. Grace was seated on the couch, her legs crossed casually, but there was a slight twitch in her fingers as she sipped her wine. Eric sat in the armchair, his usually smug expression replaced by a forced calmness. My mother perched on the edge of the other couch, wringing her hands, clearly sensing that something was wrong. I stood by the TV, the remote in my hand. I could feel their eyes on me as I cleared my throat and gestured for them to pay attention. "Thank you all for coming," I began, keeping my tone neutral. I thought it was time we had an honest discussion about what's been going on. Grace tilted her head, her lips curving into a faint smirk. "Is this really necessary, Daniel? Can't we just move past whatever tantrum you've been throwing lately?" I ignored her, turning to Eric. "Eric, anything you'd like to say before we start?" Eric shifted uncomfortably, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. Dan, I'm not sure what this is about, but, oh, I think you know exactly what it's about." I cut him off sharply. My mother interjected, her voice pleading. "Daniel, let's not blow things out of proportion. We're family. We can talk this through." I turned to her, my expression icy. "Family? Funny you should mention that, Mom. Let's see just how much family means to you after this." I pointed the remote at the TV and pressed play. The first clip was from our home security footage. It showed Grace and Eric in the kitchen while I was at work, laughing, touching, sharing stolen kisses. Grace's smile was the same one she used to reserve for me. Eric leaned in close, his hand on her waist, whispering something that made her giggle like a schoolgirl. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the TV. Grace's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Her face turned ghostly pale, and her mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. Eric leaned forward, his face a mix of panic and anger. "Dan, this isn't what it looks like. Save it," I snapped, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "You're not even worth the effort." I clicked the remote, moving to the next piece of evidence, text messages. The screen filled with a collage of screenshots, messages between Grace and Eric. Explicit texts, flirty banter, conversations mocking me behind my back. One message from Eric read, "He'll never find out. He's too trusting, too soft." Another from Grace, "It's not like he has the guts to do anything, even if he did." My hands clenched in a fist as I read them aloud, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. Grace finally found her voice. "Daniel, shut up," I said, cutting her off. "We're not done yet." The next clip was from the anniversary party. The footage captured everything. The way Grace laughed as she sat on Eric's lap, the way my mother tried to cover for them, the exact moment I walked in and caught them red-handed. Eric buried his face in his hands, muttering, "Oh God." Grace stood abruptly, her voice desperate now. "Daniel, please, this isn't what it seems." I wasn't thinking straight. "It was just a mistake." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "A mistake? How long has this been going on, Grace? Months? Years? Don't insult me by calling it a mistake." She stepped toward me, tears welling in her eyes. "We can fix this, Daniel. I told you. Think of the kids. We can go to counseling. We can." I cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Think of the kids? You mean the kids you threatened to take from me if I divorced you? The kids you used as leverage while you slept with my best friend? Don't worry, Grace. I've already spoken to a judge. Good luck explaining your infidelity to the court." Her face crumpled, but I wasn't done. I turned to my mother, who had been silent throughout, her face ashen. "And you," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You knew. You knew the whole time, didn't you?" She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. "Don't bother lying. I have texts from you to Grace. You warned her about me finding out, told her to be more careful. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting them." Tears streamed down her face as she tried to explain. "I thought I was doing the right thing, Daniel. I didn't want to see your family fall apart. My family fell apart the moment you decided to cover for them." I snapped. "You betrayed me just as much as they did." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I'm your mother, Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And that's what makes it worse," I replied, stepping back. "You were supposed to have my back. Instead, you chose them." The room descended into chaos. Grace was sobbing, trying to plead her case, while Eric sat frozen, his face pale and defeated. My mother continued to cry, muttering apologies that fell on deaf ears. I watched them all with a sense of detachment. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. "Here's how this is going to go," I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Grace, I'm filing for divorce. I have more than enough evidence to ensure you get nothing. Not the house, not the kids, nothing." She looked up, her eyes wide with panic. "You can't do this, Daniel. Please don't take the kids away from me." "I didn't take them away," I said coldly. "You did, the moment you put your selfish desires above their well-being." I turned to Eric. "As for you, don't even think about showing your face around here again. You're dead to me." Eric opened his mouth to respond, but quickly shut it when he saw the look in my eyes. Finally, I looked at my mother. "And you, don't expect me to forgive you anytime soon. If ever." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't waver. I walked to the door and opened it, gesturing for them to leave. "This conversation is over. Get out of my house." Grace hesitated, her tears streaming freely now. "Daniel, please." "Out," I said firmly. One by one, they filed out, leaving me alone in the now silent house. I stood in the doorway, watching as they disappeared down the driveway. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. The chains of betrayal that had bound me were broken. The storm was over. But for them, it was just beginning. The days following the confrontation were not calm. They were the storm that swept everything in its path. But this time, I was at the helm, steering it toward the destruction of those who had wronged me. The first blow came when I filed for divorce. Grace had always thought she held all the cards, but she hadn't anticipated the airtight case I had built against her. My lawyer, a no-nonsense professional with a sharp eye for details, laid out the evidence like a prosecutor in a high-stakes trial. Infidelity, emotional neglect, threats to withhold custody. "This isn't just a case of divorce, Daniel," she said during one of our meetings. "This is a complete annihilation. She won't get a dime, let alone custody of the kids." Hearing that solidified my resolve. For years, I had been the nice guy, the one who compromised and sacrificed for the sake of peace. But now I was done playing the victim. The courtroom was a battlefield. Grace arrived looking contrite, her lawyer spinning a story of a devoted mother who had made a single mistake. I could see her desperation as she glanced toward me, her eyes pleading. "Daniel," she whispered during a break, catching me in the hallway. "Please, let's not drag this out. Think of the kids. We can settle this amicably." I stared at her, my expression blank. "Amicably? You didn't think of the kids when you were with Eric. Why should I believe you care about them now?" She flinched but quickly recovered, her tone turning sharp. "If you take this too far, you'll hurt them more than me." I leaned in slightly, my voice low and firm. "The kids will be fine. It's you who's about to lose everything." Back in the courtroom, my lawyer presented the damning evidence. The text, the footage, and Grace's threats. The judge's expression hardened with every new piece of information. By the end, there was no doubt Grace had destroyed her own case. When the ruling came, it was swift and decisive. I was granted full custody of our children, while Grace's visitation rights were restricted to supervised sessions. She wouldn't see a dime of alimony, and her threats to use the kids as leverage were now just empty words. Eric didn't fare much better. His wife, Michelle, had always been a kind and unassuming woman, but when I sent her the evidence of his betrayal, something in her snapped. I'll never forget the phone call. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "Thank you for telling me. I had no idea, but I'll make sure he pays for this." And she did. Michelle filed for divorce almost immediately, and with the evidence of his affair, she cleaned him out financially. Eric lost his house, his car, and even his position at the company he worked for after Michelle informed HR about his inappropriate conduct. One day, he called me, his voice desperate. "Damn, man, I know I screwed up, but can we talk? I need help." "Help?" I interrupted, my voice dripping with disdain. "The same way you helped me by destroying my family? Don't call me again, Eric. You made your bed. Lie in it." I hung up, feeling nothing but satisfaction. My mother's downfall was more personal. Her betrayal cut the deepest, and I made sure she understood the gravity of her actions. The rest of the family, upon learning the truth, ostracized her completely. Family gatherings became uncomfortable for her, with icy silences and subtle jabs reminding her of her role in the disaster. One evening, she showed up on my doorstep, her face etched with regret. "Daniel, please," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I made a mistake. I thought I was protecting you." I cut her off, my voice cold. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting her. And in doing so, you betrayed your own son." She broke down, sobbing. "I don't know how to fix this." I shook my head. "Maybe you can't." I didn't slam the door in her face, but I didn't invite her in either. She left that night with the weight of her choices pressing heavily on her shoulders. As for me, my focus shifted to my kids. They were my anchor through the chaos, their innocence and resilience reminding me of what truly mattered. I threw myself into being the best father I could be, attending school plays, helping with homework, and ensuring they felt loved and secure despite the upheaval. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the loneliness crept in, when the house felt too quiet after they went to bed. But I reminded myself that this was temporary, a small price to pay for the peace and stability we now had. Months turned into years, and slowly, I began to rebuild my life. During a parent-teacher conference at my youngest daughter's school, I met Amelia. She was the art teacher, kind, soft-spoken, with a warmth that immediately drew me in. We started talking, first about the kids and their progress in school, but our conversations soon grew deeper. Amelia was compassionate and patient, never pushing but always listening. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I found myself sharing everything with her: my failed marriage, the betrayal, the fallout. She listened without judgment, her eyes full of understanding. "Daniel," she said softly, placing her hand over mine, "you've been through so much, but look at what you've built. Your kids are amazing, and you're stronger than you realize." For the first time in years, I felt hope, not just for myself, but for the possibility of love again. Amelia became a part of our lives, seamlessly blending into our little family. My kids adored her, and I found myself falling for her more every day. She showed me what a real partnership looked like, one built on trust, respect, and mutual support. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Amelia turned to me and said, "You deserve happiness, Daniel. Don't ever doubt that." I smiled, pulling her close. "I think I've finally found it." As for Grace and Eric, their lives unraveled further with each passing day. Grace struggled to hold down a job, her reputation tarnished by the court case and the whispers of her betrayal. Eric, now alone and penniless, bounced from one dead-end job to another, a shadow of the man he once was. Every now and then, Grace would call, her voice full of desperation. "Daniel, can we talk? I need help," but I never answered. Their suffering wasn't something I reveled in, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing they were reaping what they had sown. Looking back, I realized that their betrayal had been the catalyst for my transformation. It had forced me to confront my own weaknesses, to rebuild myself from the ground up. And in the end, I had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the future. The fallout had been nuclear, but in its wake, I had found clarity, purpose, and a second chance at happiness. It started with the letters. Grace sent the first one, a neatly folded piece of paper that arrived in the mail, tucked between the usual bills and advertisements. Her handwriting, once familiar and cherished, now felt like a foreign artifact of a life I no longer recognized. "Daniel," it began, "I know I've hurt you in ways I can never undo. Please, for the sake of the kids, let's talk. I need to make this right." I crumpled it and tossed it into the trash without finishing. Words were cheap, and her actions had spoken louder than any apology ever could. The face-to-face confrontation came a week later. I was in the backyard mowing the lawn when I heard her voice calling my name from the gate. "Daniel, please, can we talk?" I killed the mower, wiped the sweat from my brow, and walked over. She looked disheveled, her once pristine appearance replaced by dark circles under her eyes and a desperation that clung to her like a bad perfume. "What do you want, Grace?" I asked flatly, keeping the gate between us. She clutched the metal bars, her knuckles white. I need you to hear me out. Please. I sighed, crossing my arms. You got 2 minutes? Her voice cracked as she began, tears welling up in her eyes. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you. I was selfish, and I made a horrible mistake. Eric and it's over. He left me. I lost everything, Daniel. Please, for the sake of what we had, can we at least try to find some kind of peace? I stared at her, unmoved. What we had? You destroyed what we had, Grace. You didn't just cheat on me, you humiliated me, lied to me, and threatened to take our kids away. And now that your life's fallen apart, you think you can come crawling back. Her tears fell freely now, and she clutched the gate as though it were the only thing holding her upright. I don't want to come back. I just want your forgiveness. I need it, Daniel. Please. I shook my head. Forgiveness isn't something you demand, Grace. It's something you earn. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever be able to give it to you. Her sobs grew louder, but I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone at the gate. Eric's approach was less emotional, but no less pathetic. He called me late one evening, his number still saved in my phone despite everything. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering, curiosity getting the better of me. What do you want, Eric? Dan, he began, his voice shaky and unsure. Look, I know I've got no right to ask for anything, but I need to talk to you. I stayed silent, letting the awkward pause stretch until he couldn't take it anymore. I messed up, man, he finally blurted. I know I did. I lost Michelle, I lost my job, and I lost you. And I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I laughed bitterly. Sorry? You think an apology makes up for what you did? You didn't just betray me, Eric, you destroyed 2 families. I know, he said quickly. I know, and I hate myself for it. But I'm trying to fix things, Dan. I'm trying to be better. I don't want to lose you completely. You lost me the moment you decided my wife was worth more to you than our friendship, I said coldly. Don't call me again, Eric. We're done. I hung up without waiting for a response, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction as I deleted his number from my phone. My mother was the hardest to confront. She showed up at my door one Sunday afternoon, holding a Tupperware container of my favorite lasagna, as though it were a peace offering. Daniel, she said softly when I opened the door. Can we talk? I hesitated, my grip tightening on the doorknob. What do you want, Mom? I want to fix things, she said, her voice trembling. I made a mistake. I thought I was doing what was best for you, for the family. But I was wrong, and I need you to know how sorry I am. I stepped aside, letting her in, but not saying a word. She placed the lasagna on the kitchen counter and turned to face me, wringing her hands nervously. I know I failed you, she began, tears glistening in her eyes. I should have protected you. I should have told you the truth. But I thought if I kept quiet, things would work themselves out. They didn't, I said bluntly. She nodded, her tears spilling over. I know, and I hate myself for it. I hate that I hurt you, that I let you down. Please, Daniel, give me a chance to make this right. I stared at her, the woman who had raised me, who I had once trusted more than anyone in the world. I don't know if I can, I said quietly. You betrayed me, Mom. You chose Grace over your own son. How do I forgive that? Her shoulders shook as she cried, but I didn't reach out to comfort her. I'll do whatever it takes, she said through her sobs. I just want my son back. I need time, I said after a long silence. And even then, I don't know if things will ever go back to the way they were. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I understand. She left a few minutes later, the lasagna untouched on the counter. Closure came gradually, like the slow thaw after a long winter. I focused on my kids, pouring all my energy into being the best father I could be. We went to the park, baked cookies, and had movie nights where we laughed until our sides hurt. One evening, as I tucked them into bed, my youngest looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. Daddy, are you happy now? I smiled, my heart swelling with love. I'm getting there, sweetheart. I'm getting there. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The final piece of closure came when Grace showed up unannounced one last time. She stood on the porch, her face gaunt and her eyes hollow. Daniel, she said softly, I'm leaving town. I just wanted to say goodbye. I nodded, not inviting her in. Goodbye, Grace? She hesitated, her lips trembling. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. I don't know, Grace. But I do know this, I'm moving on. And so should you. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face, and walked away. As I closed the door behind her, I felt an unfamiliar lightness in my chest. The past was finally behind me, and the future was mine to shape. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the backyard. I leaned against the wooden railing of the deck, watching my kids race across the freshly mowed lawn, their laughter filling the air. Beside me stood Amelia, my wife, her warm smile making the moment even more perfect. Dinner's almost ready, she said, nudging me with her elbow. I glanced at her, unable to suppress a grin. You mean you almost burned dinner, and now you're hoping I'll grill instead? Amelia laughed, swatting my arm playfully. Okay, guilty. But hey, I got as far as seasoning the steaks. That counts for something, right? I kissed her cheek. It counts for a lot. Watching her walk toward the grill to set up the food, I marveled at how far I had come. Life was peaceful now, filled with genuine love and trust. But the scars of the past still lingered, faint reminders of what I had endured. The journey here hadn't been easy. After the divorce was finalized, I threw myself into rebuilding my life for the sake of my kids. I moved to a new city, started my own business, and focused on being the father they needed. At first, it was just survival, getting through each day without letting the bitterness consume me. Amelia came into my life like a gentle breeze, unexpected but welcome. We met at a charity event I attended on a whim. She was organizing the auction, her hair a little messy and her clipboard packed with notes. She caught me trying to sneak out early and roped me into bidding on a painting I didn't even like. You can't leave without contributing, she had said, her eyes sparkling with determination. I was just stepping out for air, I lied, trying to avoid her gaze. She said with a knowing smirk. So how much are you willing to donate for a breath of fresh air? Let's start with $500. I laughed, taken aback by her confidence, and ended up staying for the rest of the night. That painting now hung in our living room, a daily reminder of the start of something new. Meanwhile, Grace and Eric had spiraled into lives I barely recognized. Grace tried to hold on to her facade for a while, but her reputation caught up with her. Word of the affair spread, and people started to distance themselves. She lost her social circle, her job, and, most painfully, the respect of her own kids. One day, I caught her outside the courthouse after another custody hearing. She looked tired, her once pristine appearance replaced by a worn-down version of herself. Daniel, she said hesitantly, holding a stack of papers. Can we talk? I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. What is it, Grace? She sighed, glancing down at the ground. I just wanted to say, I'm glad the kids have you. They need stability, and I can't give them that right now. I studied her, trying to find the anger that used to bubble up at the sight of her. But all I felt was pity. They'll always have me, I said simply. I'm not going anywhere. She nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I know. That was the last real conversation we had. She faded from our lives, showing up sporadically but never staying long enough to rebuild the bond she had broken. Eric's downfall was even more spectacular. After losing his family and his job, he tried to reach out to mutual friends for support. But loyalty doesn't come easily when you've burned every bridge. I heard through the grapevine that he moved out of state, chasing a fresh start that never quite materialized. Dad, watch this. My son's voice pulled me back to the present. He was attempting some kind of cartwheel, though it looked more like a tumble, but his enthusiasm made me laugh. Nice try, buddy, I called out. Keep practicing. Amelia returned to my side, a glass of iced tea in her hand. They're growing up so fast, she said softly. I nodded, feeling a pang of both pride and sadness. Yeah, they are, but I'm lucky to be here for it. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for a moment we stood in silence, just soaking in the peace of the moment. Later that evening, after the kids were tucked into bed, Amelia and I sat on the couch, flipping through old photo albums. One picture made us pause, a shot of me and the kids at the park shortly after the divorce. My smile was forced, my eyes tired, but the kids looked genuinely happy. "You've come a long way," Amelia said, tracing her finger over the image. "So have we," I corrected, pulling her closer. "I wouldn't have made it without you." She smiled, leaning her head against mine. "I didn't do anything special. You just needed someone to remind you of who you are." Her words struck a chord. She was right. I had spent so long defining myself by my failures, by the betrayal, that I had forgotten my worth. It wasn't until I let go of the past that I truly began to heal. Occasionally, I'd hear updates about Grace and Eric, but they felt like distant echoes of a life I no longer lived. Regret had consumed them both, but it wasn't my burden to bear. Justice, I had learned, wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming control. By focusing on my kids, my new marriage, and my own happiness, I had found a sense of peace that no amount of revenge could have given me. As the night wore on, Amelia fell asleep with her head on my shoulder. I sat there for a while, staring out the window at the stars. The scars of the past would always be there, faint reminders of what I had endured, but they no longer defined me. In the end, I realized that the best revenge wasn't watching Grace and Eric suffer. It was living a life so full of love and joy that their betrayal became irrelevant. And as I sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of my home, I knew I had won.